because I am very curious of how you ended up getting to your thought process. And this is like these types of conversations where we were respecting each other, we're not yelling. They need to happen a lot more often, which is one of the reasons I love talking to you, and I love having this podcast. Is that it's okay to disagree with someone,
100%. Because what we've lost really in the past, a few decades is what they call in urban planning the third space, right? Like you have your home, you have your work, and then where is the place for public mingling, exchanging of ideas that's really one of the last remainings is the library, but like a third place you don't have to pay for. Where are the city squares and the places that the public can go and exchange ideas and dialogue? Those don't really exist anymore. They've all been purchased or leased out. I mean, you're running out of park or subway benches in New York City. Like you can't even sit and wait for your train anymore because they're trying to keep people from sleeping on them. They don't have bus benches anymore in a lot of Portland. They have these weird things that you're supposed to lean on. It's gross, but like the more we do that, the more we isolate ourselves in front of screens, the less chance we have to return to a society, if it ever existed, where we can have meaningful disagreements. And the outrage sort of like machine is so profitable. Mm-hmm. It is so profitable for MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, and all of the minor media companies, all of whom are owned by Disney, et cetera, major institutions. It is so profitable to demonize one side, lift up the other side, and then realize that there's so many shades of grays and colors. I don't identify as red or blue, like electorally. Mm-hmm. I am a precinct committee person of the local Democratic Party, but that is something I do because I find it interesting, not because I deeply believe in the Democratic Party for the reasons you mentioned. The super majority vote to impose this terrible deal is one reason why they will never work for us. Their interests are not our interests.
No, they're not aligned. And this is the thing that scares me is, obviously you could tell I am pretty fucking pro business, right? I definitely am. But I think it's very important, for whatever reason, this is something that you'll be on the podcast again, I'm sure. I love talking to you. As I get older, and as you get to know me more, you'll find that I like chaos. I get excited. So if this strike happens, I feel like it'll be very chaotic. And I think these types of things are good because it means that people understand that they still have power, right? Power not placed in the institution of government, but placed in themselves, in someone that is just like you. You have a bunch of people that are like MAGA. Donald Trump has nothing fucking in common with you. He's a billionaire. His parent. He's not blue collar. His dad was a multi-millionaire. You are the gum on his shoes to him, right? The same thing with AOC, whatever, any of these people, right? You have nothing in common, and it's so easy. Red, blue, whatever. They're all like, no, this is my savior. No, these people have nothing in common with you, and you demonize the person that is way more similar to you and has the same world perspective, a little bit different, but the same. Let's say socioeconomic class. They might be your neighbor. They have a Trump flag, and you might have a whatever. Anyways, but you demonize that person. But when you see a strike like this, it's people that are all in the same situation, finding collective power in a group and standing up to the rest of the world together and saying, "Fuck you. We're not getting what we want. No one else is helping us. It's up to each other, and we're going to lean on each other, and we're going to figure it out." And I think that it's important to see a lot of things like that happen. And it's because we have to get to the point, and John, you pointed out a great point. The grocery store thing, that's pretty fucking scary if you think about it. We're building these massive corporations. You had the largest transfer and wealth, right, to fucking Walmart, Amazon, all these companies, and all these independent shops went out of business. It's the innovation is going to suffer at one point. Like, we're not going to get the best products. We're probably going to lose a lot more family-run farms. I didn't want to get. We should probably talk about that someday on the pod, though. Is how many how there's such few family farms anymore, and now there's anyway. So, sorry, I got sidetracked there. But
yeah, industrial agriculture.
Yeah, that's a topic for a whole nother story. But it's like, what kind of world do we want to live in? Because I feel like you and I, we want this. This is what I always try when I'll ask you very pointed questions. We're really not that far off. We've just taken different paths on how to get there. I feel like the difference between you, I think you and John are probably more similarly aligned here, is that you guys have more compassion and empathy than I do, and I might be a little bit more like analytical. Like, it's my money. Fuck y'all, dude. I feel like that's kind of the difference.
I mean, I was going to say that Andrea's very impassioned. I had never really heard of the maximum wage, and to be honest,
John, shut your mouth.
I'm kind of. There was something I saw a while ago that somebody brought up that was similar to that like, why don't we just all agree that if you hit $1 billion in personal liquid wealth, that you won the game. Everything after $1 billion just goes into a lottery or something. It's like, you don't like, congratulations, you're great, you're awesome. Why do you need that much money? I don't want that much money. I can't even imagine what it's like to make $100,000.
But here's the thing.
Here's
the thing. None of us. I just don't think none of us have made that much money. And to make that much money, you have to be different. And I know if I made that...
But why do you have to make that much money?
But I'm just going to tell you. I know if I made that much money, I'd be like, you fucks. You don't know how hard it was for me to make this money. And no one gets to tell me what to do with something that's mine. Fuck you. This is mine. I will do with it as I please. And I feel like that's how they feel. And I agree.
Oh, the unfortunate reality is class mobility. I mean, the ability to be born lower class and rise through the classes, or the ability to be born upper class and fall, is at the lowest point ever. Mm-hmm. Ever. So the fact is that most of the people who are millionaires were born in millionaire families. Most of the people who make their six-figure, $250,000, $500,000 salaries had parents who made the equivalent $250,000 to $500,000 salaries. Most of the people who go and get their PhDs or their law degrees come from families of lawyers and doctors as well. Class mobility is a myth perpetuated to continue the cycle of inequality we have. We would not have a system of so many have-nots and a handful of haves if not for this myth that maybe one day I'll strike it rich too. Maybe one day I'll do it too. And that's also how war is propagated too. We have this great myth of the United States as some liberator of people, and maybe one day we'll get to have the gun too. But the fact is that in both scenarios, it's a farce and a lie used to manipulate the masses. Out of the 350 million people here in the United States, very few will reach that level. In fact, in Oregon, 3 people have as much wealth, not income, wealth, as the bottom half of Oregon. The bottom 50% of Oregon, if we all put our checking accounts, retirement accounts, everything together, have as much wealth as 3 people. You can look that up at the Oregon Center for Public Policy. In Oregon today, wealth inequality and income inequality is at its highest we've ever seen. And the result of that you see on the streets of Corvallis and Eugene and Portland. That is the reason why things are this way. If those 3 people had half as much money, woohoo, like how much money could be redistributed? So, these are collective decisions we've made as a society, whether we realize we're making the decision or not, that 3 people can have as much money as half of Oregon, over 1 million people. Would you think that that's a fair and reasonable society?
Well, my issue that I have with the whole thing, right, is who gets to tell them that they can't?
I would say 2.6 million Oregonians. We should come together and tell them.
But why? But why? Right? I understand what you're saying. I'm not gonna lie. Like I will agree with you that the disintegration of the middle class is very concerning. Right? That's not good. That never. If you look historically, if you lose your middle class and if people lose hope, that's not good. Your society implodes, right? But I don't have as much of an issue with people getting rich, right? Like I aspire to be rich at some point in my life. I every day I work towards that goal, right?
Can I interject real quick?
No. But
do you aspire to be rich because money, or do you aspire to be wealthy and rich because money equals freedom?
Money equals freedom.
Ooh.
So why should we make it a competitive thing? Shouldn't people just be able to enjoy their God-given rights and what do they always say, natural rights?
Yeah.
That are given to us by our creator or whoever you want to call, you know? Why do we have to rely on some, you know, false prophet human-driven system to make it a giant pissing contest?
No, I would agree. We're the only animal on the planet that pays to live, right? We have a pretty dumb, society, right? But I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It would be nice to, have the ability to buy whatever I want. I agree. I want financial independence and financial freedom, right? That's the end game. But in order to get innovation, generally speaking, this is the argument that's always used, innovation tied to compensation is good. Like you're not going to be able to innovate. If you look at any of the communist country, they always steal technology from the capitalist societies, right? Whether it's not a perfect system, and I'm not even sure that we're really in capitalism anymore, right? But at one point in time, it was pretty good. And also, I will also say that as shitty as it is, man, we're just going down a whole myriad of places, and I love it. As shitty as we have a lot of problems, I still to this day do believe that this is the best country. Now, as far as Andrea, I want to get back to kind of the homeless thing. I don't know what solves that problem, because we throw millions and millions and millions of dollars of all of our money at it, and it just keeps getting worse. So throwing millions and millions of dollars. Ooh, she got excited. She's like, no, we fucking don't. I won. All right, come on in.
Okay. How many public housing, social housing, publicly funded apartments do you think we built last year in Oregon?
I don't know. Probably not that many.
None. None. Because what the thing is, these fucking leeches, and I will say that these parasites and leeches called the landlord and real estate equity industry, whatever you want to goddamn call them, what they do is these private public partnerships where we spend money through tax incentives, tax breaks. We give grants. We do everything, every mental gymnastic you can imagine, except for give people apartment keys and build new apartments that are in a city center or in a place that it makes sense to give people a frickin' place to sleep. There are many, many, many places in the world that do not have what we are dealing with, because they literally just say there's private housing and it can have all the bells and whistles, but you know what? We got some engineers with their little hats on, and we're going to build some efficient buildings so that if you have no place to stay and you have no apartment, fill out some paperwork. Here's an apartment for you. And you know what? It works pretty well. And for, again, most of human society, hundreds of thousands of years, we never let people die in the streets just a mile away from us. It's unheard of and it's inhumane. So we spend a lot of money, but not smartly, because we don't build public housing anymore. And do you know why we don't really build public housing or social housing in the United States?
I mean, it didn't really turn out very well for my people. The projects were not good.
No, those were not good at all. Those were not good. And I totally agree. It is there's ways it is done across Europe and across Asia and across South America and in Africa. There's many places where social and public housing is built and ran well. And then there's many places it is underfunded, as you mentioned, as a lot of big like projects in New York and in other cities. It's not funded, not taken care of, and it's treated as an afterthought, and it's not prioritized. And then we've reached the state where we barely tried it, and then we didn't even try it very well. And now we just go for these public-private partnerships, or in Oregon, a lot of deals where if you have a certain number of rent-controlled units for 5 years, you get 5 tax-free years, and then you can up the rent however much you want. But I mean, I guess in terms of freedom, if healthcare was free, if housing was, well, not free, no cost, if housing was no cost, and if food was no cost, and if all of your basic needs were met, would you still need $1 million if you had food, your flu shot, the ability to see a doctor, and you had a warm place to sleep?
Yes, I would need more. 100%.
Hell yeah.
100%.
I respect that.
There's a lot of traveling I'd like to do. There's a lot of things I'd like to learn. I'd want to invest more, to make more. I plan on having a family at one point. I want to set them up for life, right? If I have a business, I can pay my kids $6,000 a year as an employee, right? And invest that. It's almost better than a Roth IRA. There are a bunch of tricks that the rich employ to set up future generations. And I would encourage each and every one of you that are listening to look into it, right? Like, I'm just saying, like, I
believe it's South Korea that the government takes 100%. There's no inheritance in a state handed down generation to generation. So even some of that's kind of an anomaly in the U.S.
That's insane.
Where we allow such wealth transfer.
That's insane, though. Like, you can't. You've just said that you hate the government. Why do you want them to get fucking paid? And why are you so against the individual getting paid? It doesn't make any sense.
Have you ever worked for the federal government? Have
I've worked
been a federal employee before?
Directly, not through a shell company.
I've worked for like a state government before, and you get paid once a month, and you've got all the holidays off. The government, you don't work.
I've worked for an institution that's paid for mostly and has to follow federal rule. And most of my family's work has been through that, or either directly.
Government jobs are awesome.
Well, I used to work for the United States Geological Survey.
Nice.
I used to work for the Environmental Protection Agency, and I used to work for the Department of Defense. And what I will say, there's a lot of hard-working people there. Not a lot of people getting rich, right? So
no way.
No. So
but you get all these holidays off.
Money,
you get all these holidays off. Like you get holidays off.
Not
8
that
hours.
Many.
Every fucking banking.
You want those holidays off?
Yes, but that's not how. That's not how.
I envision a world where we all work as we need to. None of us are too hurried. None of us are too sick. We all have plenty of time to spend with our dogs and our kids. And I think the government employment should be a model for how all workers are treated, which is paid reasonably, paid fairly, accountable to the public, accountable to each other. And federal workers do so much and honestly don't ask for a whole lot. And I don't know. So when I think of paying taxes, what I think of is essentially, have you ever shared food with roommates where like one person buys the cereal, the other person buys the oat milk?
Sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
I mean that's a government, right? That is collective decision making.
I look.
Oh my God, Rick, you've participated in communism. They're going to take your libertarian card.
You've done socialism.
No, I haven't.
Done socialism, my friend.
I look at all the government essentially as fucking white collar welfare. I hate them, but again, we're coming at it from two different perspectives.
Keep in mind the biggest source of white collar welfare is the private financial and just business industry. They take
yeah,
so
the
much
military.
welfare.
No, they're producing.
Oh my
they're
God,
producing.
yeah.
I'm not saying that the military is still part of the government, but if you're talking about
Oh,
banking,
I mean like
banking
business
is,
military, like Northrop Grumman.
but they're
you know?
they're producing goods or services. The government is fucking leeching from us. There's a difference.
Oh,
I mean, but the
What about the
government's playing.
library?
I was gonna say the government's playing middleman for Boeing and Northrop Grumman to leech money from us to build bombs to kill brown people.
Not true.
Are you both in Corvallis?
No, I'm in Westland.
I am.
Westland? Okay, so two examples just in any city. Tell me if you think these are the parasites of our society.
Yes.
The library
Solid.
and the public health building, like the public hospital that we used to have still have many thriving, like public healthcare facilities. Like I had in Lawrence, Kansas, a public mental health facility with public workers and public social workers. Are these the leeches of society?
I mean, those are two good examples out of 972. So you're not batting that high.
Okay.
What about public works, the water,
experiment.
electricity?
Okay.
Public Works. I've worked for Public Works. Decent, pretty solid. Wastewater management, pretty solid.
I'm not gonna play the game of like if we don't, who builds the roads thing. Like,
I'm not that crazy. I'm not that
that's
crazy
the
of a
instant
libertarian.
kneecap to any libertarian. Is what about the roads?
So the fact is what we're naming, these things that aren't that bad, these are a fraction of our taxes. The vast majority goes to cops and tanks, right? So I think if we think about, there's two questions really. Is it good for people to come together and collectively and democratically distribute shared resources and pay in and take out of a shared system so that more equitable and fair life outcomes happen? The government question is very different than should governments fashion themselves as states, draw boundaries, create laws, prisons, enforcers, and have a monopoly on violence. The state, military, prison, industrial apparatus, a totally separate question, I feel.
Were you talking about, were you, in that example you just gave, are you talking about like states' rights versus federal government rights? I got a little bit confused there.
State is in the capital S, like a nation state.
Yeah,
like the U.S.-Mexico border.
Yeah.
Should it exist, and why?
Are we going here?
Yeah,
okay. That's a conversation for a different podcast. Because I'm going to be honest with you, I legitimately have no clue about the U.S.-Mexico border and either is it a crisis or is it not? I do not know. I do not understand.
Or Oregon-Washington border.
The California border.
Like who draws these borders and why?
I mean, I feel like you're like team like no human is an alien, and that's okay. I like that team. That's a good team. I do feel like I might be inclined to agree, but then there's I just don't know. It's very interesting.
Yeah,
it's very interesting. We were running out of time. I could sit around. I feel like we're spinning our wheels here, but I feel like I could talk to you for hours. That's for damn sure. Thank you so much for being on this pod. It's been a joy. I want to, send me some of the history. Send me some books, some links that I could kind of check out to educate myself. And I'm very interested in the way that you think. I like the way your mind works. I'm glad that there are humans that exist like you that care. So
same to you. It's always a pleasure to be on here, and thank you for doing this work. I like the way your mind works, that you're able to have people on, have these discussions, and keep working through hypotheticals and thinking and reasoning around instead of I remember there are some people that you're like, oh, what do you think about labor unions? And they're like, I hate the unions. They slam the door, that sort of thing. So thank you for having me on.
I do want, one of the things I do want to say is I would like for you to study the the people that you don't like, these billionaires and these millionaires and these entrepreneurs. And the reason I say that is I think that you will figure out that the system it's pretty fucked up, but these people that are making this amount of money, they're really smart. And a lot of them have written books on how you can get creative on hiding, not paying less taxes, ways to bring down your taxable income.
Why do you
ways
think
that
they got so rich?
Ways that you can expense it. I'm just saying, and how to invest, right? Because my fear is like you're going to live a life that is about service and helping people, and then when you're like 70, what if you're bankrupt and poor, and you're like, what the fuck? I don't want this.
I have two things to leave you with. One, I have a half-completed minor in business from the University of Kansas, because I took one step in, I took a few courses, and then I did a 180 and I walked right back out. So I have a half-completed minor. The second thing is I have personally tracked every single budget transaction I have ever made for 11 years. And I understand, even as far as war tax evasion, which are people who say, I want to make as little money as possible so that I pay as little as possible in federal taxes to vote with my dollar and not support the war effort. I hope you know that I've studied their tools, and I've studied 401(k)(3)Bs, Roth, and traditional 401ks and IRAs, and
you invested?
I've seen enough of it to know that.
Have you invested?
I tell you what, I don't make a lot of money, so if I had a lot of money, I would do a whole lot more. I tell you what, I got that meager a little bit of federal TSP, federal retirement plan, and I tell you what, I got that little bit. If I had more, I'd do more. But what I do know is I am invested in the Rik's Mind podcast. You can count on that.
All right, you're an angel. Thank you so much for being on. We're gonna talk finances after the show. Just
let's do it.
All right. Hey, folks, thanks for listening. We've got, again, I'm gonna be sharing off camera some of the investments in the Rik's Mind portfolio. We've invested in private prisons because they trade legally on stock exchange. That's not a joke. We are holding Raytheon. We're about the future. We're about the future here. We invest in the industries.
We need to have a board meeting
that change the world. All right, folks. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening.
Okay, check out my non-lethal human restraint NFTs after the jump. See you, comrade.
All right, folks. We'll talk to you next week.